Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego of the state of Arizona saying that he's leaning against running for president in 2028. Now I have some of my own thoughts about this and something that I think could happen for 2028 that'd be a very smart move for the Democrats. But first I'm going to go through this article that reported it from KJZZ Phoenix 91.5, a local station there, and then I'm going to go into my own personal thoughts about this news. So the article said that Ruben Gallego has recently traveled to key states, sparking rumors she's considering a run for president. But the Arizona Democrat, during a campaign swing through New Hampshire last week, said he's leaning against running in 2028. At this point, I don't think so, Gallego said during an interview with WMUR, the local news station in New Hampshire, in the city of Manchester. He said, I have 3 little kids, I have the work I'm doing, I also love being able to spend time with my kids, he said. But I do have a message that I want the Democrats to listen to. So far this year, Gallego has campaigned in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, as well as Iowa, the home of caucuses that are traditionally the first major contest of the presidential primary season. And New Hampshire is the first state in the nation to hold a presidential primary every 4 years. Gallego, as he did earlier this year, didn't officially rule out a run for higher office, but traveling across the country, he said, is an opportunity to connect with to working-class voters and set an example for Democrats ahead of the 2026 midterm elections and next presidential race in 2028. Gallego cites his U.S. Senate victory in Arizona, a state that voted overwhelmingly for President Trump a year ago, as evidence he has a winning message. We can start moving our country back in the right direction, but we have to kind of get out of our comfort zones, and I'm trying to help us get to that point, he told WMUR. And this article, again, is written by Ben Giles, is a senior editor of KJZZ, so make sure to go check that out and give all the credit and such to him. So this is interesting, because Ruben Gallego, right now for 2028, he makes a statement, and when you see the early polling leaders for 2028, it's pretty clear that, with respect to Senator Gallego, he's nowhere near the top of the Democratic field. And this is one of the things you talk about candidates in the general election of the presidential race. Candidates that have really no chance at winning a Democratic or Republican primary, but would be very strong in a general election, are kind of candidates like Gallego. Where you go to the Race to the White House website right now, and you look at the Democratic polling averages, you're not going to find his name very high up there, or even on here in a lot of cases. But if he were to be able to get to a general election, Gallego would have a unique ability to expand the electoral map. His Senate race, which he won in 2024 against Republican Kari Lake. Now, Kari Lake obviously has her own, I would say, problems as the Republican candidate. After everything that surrounded her in the 2022 governor's race and 2024 Senate race, Gallego was able to win by 2.4% in the state of Arizona, on the same ballot of President Trump winning the state by 5.5%. So even though Arizona had a massive swing towards President Trump and the Republicans from 2020 to 2024, don't forget, Joe Biden narrowly won the state by 0.3% in 2020. President Trump was able to win it by 5.5%. On the same ballot, Gallego was able to win by 2.4%. Now, could some of this be attributed to Kari Lake being a poor Republican candidate, more so than Gallego being a stronger Democratic candidate? You could make that argument for sure, but I think part of what Gallego says about him being a strong Democratic candidate really is probably true and needs to be taken into account here. So when you look at 2028 and you look at the electoral map right now, if it was Gallego versus J.D. Vance, I would say it starts out with Gallego getting around 222 electoral votes, Vance with about 219, and then you're looking at the battleground states, including the state of Arizona, which I think you would have to throw in here. If Gallego were able to win the states that Kamala Harris won, that would just be adding the state of New Hampshire to his column, but then he could also be able to win the state neighboring of Nevada, and if he could also win his home state of Arizona, that gets him up to 243. He's in a pretty strong situation here where he may be able to win this election, even without having to worry so much about the Rust Belt. If he wins the state of Georgia, that gets him to 259. He's on the precipice of winning. He could win it if he wins North Carolina, getting the presidency without even winning any of the Rust Belt states. Now, North Carolina is tougher to win than the 3 Rust Belt states are for a Democrat, but I'm just making a point here. There's a scenario where the Democrats could win with Gallego if you were able to do that. Now, of course, he can win one of the 3 Rust Belt states, like Pennsylvania would get him over 270. If he couldn't do that, he could also win Michigan. That would get him over 270. And if he wins Wisconsin, he would get to 269. He really, at that point, couldn't lose. He would essentially tie. He would need to pick up one other state to do that. But Gallego in the general election would be very interesting. And what he's saying about appealing to voters, independent voters, even some Republican voters, is an interesting message that could play very well in a general election, especially in an election that would be in a post-President Trump election world, where it'd be Gallego versus Vance. It would be very interesting to see a Democrat trying to take that approach in the general election. Now, what Gallego says, though, in the article about him likely not being a presidential candidate is interesting because he could be a presidential candidate, but for this to happen, he needs to win the Democratic primary. And the odds right now of him doing that are certainly stacked against him. Right now, the early polling shows the former Vice President Kamala Harris is starting out as the frontrunner in a 2028 Democratic primary. But you're already seeing that start to change. He's only up about 9 points now, where California Governor Gavin Newsom has risen up to 14.2%. Pete Buttigieg only barely ahead of him at 14.3%. Newsom right now certainly is the hot name that's surging in the recent polls. It's also usually typical after a presidential election, the past nominee of the party usually starts out as the leader, as they are the person that everyone in the party has heard of, and then over the next 2 or 3 years or so, as things start to really get picked up for the election, that candidate's name either starts to trail off in polling or they decide they're not going to run. We kind of saw this with Hillary Clinton in 2016, going then to 2020, where her name was talked about a little bit early on, and then she obviously didn't run. Mitt Romney faced similar circumstances with 2012 to 2016, and then you can go back on so forth. Al Gore's name's always mentioned. This goes on for a while. So I think Kamala Harris is the current point in time. She could run again for president in 2028 and become the nominee and totally prove me wrong, but I think it's more likely than not we see her name slowly start to fade away over the next 2 years, and we see someone new emerge like Gavin Newsom or Pete Buttigieg or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or someone like that. But point being, Ruben Gallego, if he does decide to run, will likely not start off with a very high number of support. He would probably start out at best probably around 2 to 3%, which would be trailing way behind what Harris, Buttigieg, and Newsom are currently at right now. So Gallego winning the Democratic primary in 2028, I won't call it impossible because, in American presidential politics, things are very volatile. You never really know what's going to happen. You didn't really expect President Trump to come out in 2016 and do what he did, so you can never really rule it out, but Gallego certainly is going to have an uphill battle at becoming the Democratic nominee. Now, this is what I mentioned at the start of the video. Something very interesting I think the Democrats could do is I think Ruben Gallego would be one of the better Democratic choices to be a running mate, to be vice president of the United States. Because you could have someone like Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom or even Kamala Harris be the Democratic nominee, and that's good, but they're going to need someone that's also going to be able to appeal to a lot more independent voters. And Ruben Gallego, who's touting that message about going to these early states and talking about a message for the Democratic Party and moving forward, could be the right person to do that. We saw in 2024 Kamala Harris not be able to win Nevada or Arizona or Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Now, in a different election environment, maybe she could win those states, but with someone like Ruben Gallego at the top of the ticket, is that enough to maybe help her in a state like Nevada or his home state of Arizona? That could be a very interesting scenario. Gavin Newsom, also from the state of California, that could be a similar situation as well. With Gallego on the ticket with Newsom, would they be able to carry Nevada and Arizona together? It's a possibility. I'm really interested to hear what you think in the comment section below. Do you think Gallego would be a strong candidate to be vice president as a running mate in that scenario? But there used to be the, I would say, message of picking a candidate to be a running mate. You want someone usually that's from a swing state or a competitive state that you want to make competitive. Now, in 2024, we had Tim Walz from Minnesota for Kamala Harris and J.D. Vance from Ohio. Minnesota, it's a little bit competitive at times, but there was really no doubt that Kamala Harris was going to win that state. Ohio used to be a very competitive swing state, but now there's really no doubt that President Trump and the Republicans are going to win that state. So this election didn't really do that. In 2020, didn't really happen that way either. Kamala Harris, Democrat from California, Mike Pence, Republican from Indiana. So that's kind of been breaking precedent the last few cycles or so. That hasn't really been the case, but it is possible that maybe in 2028, that could be something that's entertained, especially if someone like Gallego is proving a successful message of going around the country to states like Iowa, which voted for Trump, like Iowa, which was one of the very important swing states in 2024, at trying to prove that message. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's an interesting conversation. Obviously, 2028 is still a very long ways away, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have about Ruben Gallego for 2028. If he decides to run or doesn't decide to run, could his name be floated out there as a possible Democratic running mate? Make sure to leave all your thoughts down below in the comment section. I would check those out, so make sure to do that. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to hit like and subscribe so you always get notified when I post future videos like this one going forward. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.